I think I think it's mostly the latter. I mean, I do think that LeSean was hurt by being traded, and he just kind of lashed out here and there. He, recently said to the Philadelphia Inquirer when asked about all this stuff that, Chip doesn't like, superstar players or star players. He doesn't like those kind of guys. He didn't really bring the race element into it. And in a particular interview with Mike Rodak, who covers the Bills for ESPN.com, he's, what I do for the Eagles, he does with the Bills up there. It was published in ESPN, the magazine. That interview, Rodak kind of asked him, about that. He felt like Chip didn't get along with star players. And then LeSean went the next step and brought up the race element. I mean, I think there's been a little bit of a, since Chip got here, I mean, basically when he hired his coaching staff, the only minorities that were on it, he brought Todd Light with him from Oregon, and the other guys were Deuce Staley and Ted Williams, who had already been here. And it just seemed like he didn't have a lot of contacts, who were very diverse, let's say. He coached in New Hampshire and Oregon. He came to Philadelphia first time in the NFL. He didn't have a lot of NFL assistants, on his Rolodex. So the staff he built was sort of a hodgepodge of people. Bill Davis and Pat Shermer are just veteran NFL assistants he hired as his coordinators. There's just not a lot of guys with a lot of NFL experience that he brought with him because he didn't know those people. He had to find some people like Shermer and Davis. So I think there's an element there. I think the Riley Cooper thing was the main thing that sort of led to this sort of, kind of whispered thing about race being an issue. I was at the Inquirer still as a columnist when that happened, and I basically wrote at the time, they got to let this guy go because you have a locker room full of players, many of whom are black, and you're sending the message that that's okay with you if you don't, cut ties with this guy who made a very, ugly racist slur and was captured on video doing it. I mean, they've stood by him. They chose to keep him, and in fact, then extended his contract, gave him a new deal, and, it made him a starter after that. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people are seeing as some kind of proof. I don't think that really proves race is a real factor with Kelly. I mean, a lot of the players that have moved on from here in the last, especially the last couple of months, but even last year with Deshaun Jackson, obviously there's a lot of black players there, but a lot of the players they brought in and a lot of players that are still here are African-American players because the league is mostly African-American players. And, if you look at it as, well, LeSean McCoy, is out here because of his race, well, DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews are not, they're not white guys, and they brought them in. It's more about the salary cap hit that LeSean McCoy was going to have this year than it is about anything else. There are reasons for the things that happen, but the appearance on the outside, I can see why some people have made that conclusion. It's just, I think, a lack of the full story on some of these leaves you with that, sort of ability to say, oh, Riley Cooper's still here, but Deshaun Jackson's gone. Who's the better receiver? Well, Deshaun Jackson is, but that's not why he's gone. It's about money. It's about buying into the culture and what they're trying to do here. So I think it's a complex issue. I do think it's a little too easy to make it about race and then to slap that onto Kelly. You have to be really careful with that kind of stuff, and I think people are maybe not being that careful.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Nick Foles was white, and he got traded. So it appears that he got traded because the Eagles were looking to upgrade their roster and felt that Bradford was an upgrade over Foles. He also chose Michael Vick as the starting quarterback a couple of years ago over Foles. So I don't know. It seems that this is, some sour grapes from LeSean McCoy. But as you mentioned in the piece, Phil, over at ESPN.com, that the Eagles have 40% compared to 30% white players on their roster, which 21 non-black players on the 53-man roster. So, they're right around the league average. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he's correct. Have you ever got the sense from other players that are currently on the roster that they agree with McCoy?
No, not really. Kerry Williams, who is as arguably as outspoken as any player that's been on the team in the last couple of years, he had some trouble with some things that Chips does as far as the practices and stuff. And he said that they won a game last year, and then after the game in the locker room, Kerry Williams was talking about how basically the defensive backs are their legs are dead by the game time because of all the running they do in practice, and that they do too much. I mean, that's a legitimate observation or concern for a player to have. And, Kerry's not going to not say what's on his mind. This is a guy that says exactly what he's thinking. And it never went to be, it never became about race. It was a player who felt that what Chip was doing wasn't helpful in a way, and he said it. And I'm sure Chip didn't like the player saying it publicly. But, that's the most sort of critical thing a player has said in any way, in any public forum about Chip until now. And it wasn't about race. It was just about, the logistics of how you run a practice schedule and what it does to players. And so, guys I've talked to and the feeling I've gotten from people is generally no. Stephen A. Smith, who brought a lot of this up on TV a couple of times, he said that he has talked to people and that's what he's hearing from them. Trey Thomas obviously had some things to say. So there are, examples of people who have had concerns and brought this issue up. But like I said, when you look at what they're basing it on and the facts of the case here, I just don't think it's as cut and dry as they make it sound. Saying that Riley Cooper's still here after what he said, and he's not as good a player as some of the guys that are gone. Well, I mean that makes a good soundbite, but it's really not apples and oranges. I mean, Riley Cooper is a relatively low-paid guy by NFL standards. He's a role player. He's a guy that, is a good blocker, and they like that in their receivers. I mean, comparing him to Jeremy Maclin or Deshaun Jackson, you can't. I mean, they're obviously better players, but, he's not going to get $11 million a year either, which is what Maclin got. And he's not going to get $10 million a year, which is what Jackson was getting. So, when you're talking about players in the NFL, they are contracts and contracts with salary cap hits. So that's how you just distinguish between, who's getting them the money and who isn't. And, LaShawn McCoy was going to, count $12 million against their salary cap this year. That's the reason that Kelly moved him, not because of anything else.
Right. Phil Sheridan, ESPN.com's NFL Nation, covers the Eagles. You start the piece out by saying Chip Kelly is in a trap. What exactly do you mean by that? And is there any way that he's going to be able to kind of get that out? Is it because of the Cooper situation?
I think that's part of it. I think that's sort of what set the trap, basically, if you can use the analogy for a little bit more. But yeah, that is what set the trap there. I mean, that when it was one of the first things Kelly had to deal with in a public way as the Eagles coach. And if he had cut Cooper, none of this. Let's put it that way. If he had cut Cooper at that point, none of these other comments would be being made. I mean, they're all being made in the wake of retaining Riley Cooper, who dropped one of the ugliest slurs in our language in a public place and got caught on video doing it. So that's where it starts. And by a trap, I just mean, it's still here, and these guys are still talking about it. And now that McCoy has talked about it, then the next player who says something about it will, just as McCoy pointed to Stephen A. Smith's comments, the next player who says something will say, well, Sean McCoy thought so. I mean, there's a sort of growing body of evidence, but it's all based on hearsay, but it still counts. So to me, it's until Kelly finds a way to address it and clear the air with the players that are on the team, and he may have done that without us knowing it, but I haven't heard anything to that degree. Until he's able to kind of put the thing away and put it to rest, then these guys are going to, if you're LaShawn McCoy and you're hurt because you got traded and you wanted to stay here, then you're going to say the most hurtful thing you can think of, and that's what he said. And that's the trap that he's in. Now, right now, there's enough. The more people talk about it, the more credibility it kind of gains.
Phil Sheridan, everybody, over at ESPN.com's NFL Nation for more on the Eagles. And obviously this story coming out of nowhere today is this magazine article is going to come out with more. So that's where LaShawn McCoy's comments kind of came from. But, Phil, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time.
Absolutely, Mike.